So this is the most affordable 9mm AR pistol that also has last round bolt hold open that I've ever tested before. But that also begs the question, does affordable or cheap mean that it's junk? I really wanted something that was Glock mag compatible because that's what I typically carry on a daily basis, and I thought that it would be kind of cool to have a primary secondary type situation where I have interchangeable magazines that work across both platforms, as well as interchangeable calibers that work between both. I know that, with a 9mm AR pistol, it doesn't make the round any more lethal, but it makes the shooter more accurate. A couple of reasons it does that is obviously longer type sight radius deal up here, better red dot systems that have bigger windows. It also gives you better stabilization, more points of contact. On a handgun, you typically have 2. On a carbine or AR pistol, you have 4 points of contact, being both hands, incidental shoulders, or just your cheek, or a combination of incidental shoulder and cheek. So regardless, having more points of contact makes you a more accurate shot. And so the goal of being more accurate is if you ever did have to defend your life and you're super nervous, which you would be if you did have to defend your life, unless you're experienced in defending your life, you'd be less shaky because you have more points of contact. Now, my first experience with a 9mm AR pistol that had last round bolt hold open that accepted Glock mags was this Angstadt Arms 9mm build that I did back in 2017. And this is a really fun gun. And I just kind of went all out on it. Did all the little upgrades you could do to it. Crazy expensive trigger, all these little Tyrant CNC and Strike Industries upgrades on it. And I really, really enjoyed this. And and over the past few years of being on YouTube, I've also done quite a few different videos on these carbines, these Roni carbines that you put your Glock handgun into, and it kind of mimics the AR9 to an extent. But nothing's really been able to hold a candle to my CMMG Banshee. Now, granted, the Banshee is literally twice the price of this guy. This has radial delay blowback. I know that Angstadt Arms now has roller delay blowback, which I have not tested yet, but I am looking forward to testing it. I did send them an email. I'll have to follow up with them and see what's going on with that. Radial delay blowback, I have videos that are dedicated to that, but in a nutshell, it reduces the recoil. By this particular one, made by FM products, and I'm no stranger to FM products. I actually tested one of their side charging 9mm uppers a couple of years ago. You can see here, this latch comes out and then you can pull it down like this, and then it goes back. And I simply just slapped this onto my CMMG or my Angstadt Arms, and it ran really, really well. And it was super affordable. I forget what it cost, but it cost a lot less than the other 9mm uppers. Now that affordability also applies to this guy. This guy is in the $600 range. Depending on which models you get, it can determine the affordability, or it can add or subtract price. There are 3 barrel lengths, and we're gonna go into what actually changes the price here in a second when we dive up close. But I've been able to put a ton of rounds through it. I think around 600-700, somewhere in that. I know with the pandemic and stuff, I just don't wanna shortchange the reviews. I mean, I have to a little bit, but I'll just pay the prices for the ammo just to get the videos out, because I feel like it does a lot of good in the world, so I'm willing to spend the money on the extra ammo when I can find it to get these tests kind of properly done. I would love to have done like 1,000 rounds. I do have to cut it back a little bit, but I'm trying to really push that out and increase the budget for ammo. Let's find out what this FM 9mm AR pistol is all about. Let's dissect it and see if we can find out where they cut cost on this, because especially in 2021, everything is really expensive. Not because it needs to be, just because of supply and demand. But these, you can actually find them in stock. I'll tell you more about that here in a minute on where you can get them and stuff. But I want to find out how they're able to produce these for so cheap. I want to find out if it's actually going to be reliable. And then one of the last things that I like to cover in every single video that I make is, although this was sent to me to do the review, I like to look at these reviews from the perspective of I've just spent my money on it. So I would like to cover, would I buy it knowing what I know now? I know the subscribers already know this, but if you're new to the channel, the first link in the video description. I do have a full list, places where you can find, the Holo Sun. This is the Foxtrot Mike FMP-9 in all its little glory. Now, I have mine in the 5-inch variant, and everything that you see on here, aside from the red dot, came with it, including these cool little rail scale looking things, including this little finger guard here, which we'll talk more about in a little bit when we talk about shooting footage. It also comes with this cool little flash can. Comes with the Mission First Tactical blade for a brace. It's not like the SBA3 that you can just adjust it on the fly. You do have to put an Allen wrench in there to be able to adjust it. So my thing is I always just set it to where it's comfortable for me and I kind of just leave it there. The downside is it's hard to collapse to put into storage without that little bolt right there. It also comes with a more vertical style angle on the grip portion here that has a really good texture to it, as opposed to the ones that come with the standard rifle angle, which tend to tweak your wrist. Has a standard mil-spec trigger, standard mil-spec safety, standard mil-spec charging handle. Very easy to use controls. The mag release is very large and it's very ergonomic, right in the optimal spot for pressing it. It also has a flared mag well to make it easier to reload and insert magazines. The other interesting thing that I like about this is where it mates to from the handguard to the upper. You have this little block here like we usually do, but I thought it was interesting how it mated to it. You'll notice there's a little cutout there, and that kind of stops this from spinning. Not that I ever had one spin on me, but I thought it was kind of cool that they took a little extra precaution there just to make sure that it doesn't spin. You can see all the internals. They're all just mil-spec stuff, nothing crazy, but you can always upgrade that as you see fit. Because like I mentioned, this thing is really affordable, and it's around the $600 to $700 mark, depending on which variant that you choose to pick up. Here's the bolt carrier group. Let me clean it up real fast. I have a lot of oil on this because it's making this funny noise. Nothing bad, it's just annoying, which we'll talk about here in a minute. As I put a thicker viscosity oil on it, I think it was some frog lube or something like that, was because it makes this really funny noise when you're shooting it, when the bolt is traveling from here into the buffer tube. It almost sounds like it's dry, even though it's not. And I'll show you what I mean here in a second, but I wanted to give you guys a good look at the bolt. The bolt does appear to be very properly staked so that these nuts don't back out. It is a direct blowback. It doesn't have the radial delay blowback. And that's the way the majority of these 9mm bolts work. I'm gonna put a little more oil on it. We'll put it back in and I'm gonna let you hear what this thing sounds like. Also wanna put some on the charging handle. This part could be the cause of the sound. You could see like how much it's rubbed right there. I wonder if that's what's making the noise. That'd be interesting. I like to keep my ARs running really, really wet, just because they tend to just run better that way. You know, if you get like a nickel boron bolt carrier group, sometimes you can get away with them running dry. And that's fine, but it still produces a lot of heat. So here's the noise that it makes. You can really hear it back here in the buffer tubes. So I don't know why that is. I've never had a gun to do that a lot. So I'm not saying that's an area of concern, but it is fascinating. So it looks to me, right? So they're using Mission First Tactical grip, Mission First Tactical brace, and they does come with these cool little, you know, like I said, rail scales and stuff. So to me, the only place where I can see where they really cut cost is using standard mil-spec internals, as well as using a Shockwave style brace instead of the SBA3. You know, these braces, you know, at least in non-pandemic times, are typically like $30, whereas the SBA3s were typically $110. But aside from using mil-spec parts in this, that seems to be the only place where they've cut quality. Another thing I like to check for is how much wobble is between the upper and the lower. Not that that makes a difference on the performance of the firearm, but it does give you an indication of how much care was taken into the milling and the forging of different parts and stuff like that. You can see here, there's slight movement, but not even enough to make a sound. I have had some that just click, click, click. So it's fairly tight. I mean, that's all fine and dandy, right? But how does this thing perform at the range? And would I buy it knowing what I know now? And also, is there anything on here that I would upgrade? Back up top. So we have a lot of upgrades and more videos planned for this guy in the very near future. One thing that I'm definitely gonna change out is the trigger. Not that the trigger sucks, it's just mil-spec. Nothing wrong with that, but why not upgrade it if you can? Additionally, I might change out the brace for something more adjustable, haven't decided yet. And then, after we get all the upgrades done, there might be more or not, we're gonna be looking at this guy from Gray Man Tactical. Now my goal with this is to mount it in the trunk of my Camaro ZL1. For those of you that don't know, I have a car channel called Torque Toolbox. You know, I bought a couple cars to build on the channel and then maybe flip them one day and buy more cars and do it. But right now I'm building a ZL1 and a Civic Type R. And I thought it'd be really cool to mount this in the trunk of a ZL1 because the ZL1 has literally nowhere to put a gun. The back seat is stupid small. The front seat, you know, is also small. There's just no storage. The only downside to this is I'm gonna have to trim it to fit the trunk because it's still a little bit too large. But I thought it'd be kind of cool to get this trimmed up somehow, mount it on the underside of my trunk, and have this ready to go, and maybe have some backup magazines for it. I don't know if it's gonna work, but it might. But Gray Man Tactical makes all kinds of cool stuff for various cars, you know. I'll probably get something for my truck eventually to put on the back seat. We'll be making future videos about that, and I'll also include a link to where you can get this stuff in the build list that I mentioned earlier. So now let's go into what this thing was like to shoot at the range. So if you want 10 rounds and you live in a slave state, first trip to the range, it shot amazingly well. It feels really good. I love that they put in this more vertical angle of a pistol grip here compared to a lot of others that I've tried that have the standard rifle angle. Typically when the angle of it is kicked backwards, it makes you want to chicken wing your elbow just because it hurts your wrist otherwise. But this one, it's super easy to shoot with it tucked in, and I've had zero malfunctions with this. I just oiled it up, took it to the range, and shot it. It shot very accurately. It is super easy to control. And although it doesn't have radial delay blowback, it is a ton of fun. I've had zero malfunctions with it in the 600-700 rounds that I put through it. You can't really say anything bad about it because it's affordable. That's the thing. You know, as I showed you up close when I was taking this apart, this thing is completely oiled. In the buffer tube, in the bolt, everywhere. And it still makes this super annoying noise. Like that. I posted a video on Instagram a couple of weeks ago when I was out testing it. You know, it was just like a POV video of me shooting it. And everybody's like, oh man, your bolt's stupid dry, your bolt's stupid dry. And I'm like, no, it's literally doused in oil and grease. I don't know where this noise is coming from. I don't know if on the inside of this buffer tube or something just needs to be wore down a little bit, but it is kind of annoying. But when you're shooting, it's not that bad because it's super fast. It'd be like, the last round bolt hold open feature works really well. I never had it not lock open for me on the last round. I never had any types of malfunctions or jams with it. And it's just very basic, very effective, but also very affordable. So let's talk about pros and cons of this guy. The con would be that it has limited, features to it. It's using the Shockwave brace instead of the SBA3 brace, which, don't get me wrong, I love the SBA3 brace, but if you want to shave some money down off of a build, hey, there's really no cons that I can talk about. And it sucks because I really like talking about cons. I think those are important to talk about so that you as a viewer know what to expect when you buy something. The only con that I can really find is that stupid noise that it makes, but I can't fault it for having a basic charging handle or a basic trigger or basic controls because it's so affordable. Now if this thing was like $800 or more, I would be like, wow, dude, like that's a little expensive for what you get. But shooting it was very well balanced considering how short the barrel is. I have the 5-inch version. They do make a 4-inch and a 10-inch. I feel like the 5-inch is perfect for this. I feel like, it gives you just enough barrel and not too much barrel, not too little barrel. On the 4-inch version, though, you only get one of those M-lock sections, which I'd rather have two, with an extra inch. These little hand guards here, or finger guards, are very important to have. So when you're shooting it, your hand doesn't slide out and go in front of the barrel. If you notice, that's why I have one of those on here, especially before I put this flash can on it, because your fingers were right there at the edge. And the same thing goes for this guy. Although it's not as short, it's nice to have something here to hold on to. The guy is super balanced, shoots really well. And it's funny because sometimes when I've gotten products to test, sometimes you get these high-end things and you're like, dude, this is gonna be awesome. And you're impressed, but because it costs like $2,000, you're like, okay, it's still expensive. But when I get a product that is basic and super affordable and performs as well as this guy has performed, I'm even more impressed. Knowing what I know now, I would totally buy this again. I think this is the perfect 9mm AR pistol, especially for someone who is new to 9mm AR pistols and you don't want to get into the build. You can get this, save your money, and then over time, once you start identifying things that you don't like about it, like maybe you don't like the charging handle, okay, get a Radian ambidextrous charging handle. Maybe you don't like this safety, okay, get a Radian 90-degree safety. Maybe you don't like this trigger, okay, get a new drop-in trigger. I think with a trigger, a Radian safety and charging handle, this thing would be perfect. Now, it would also cost a lot more money, but it would be perfect almost. And the other con that I'd have to give it, but I can't really give it this con because it's so cheap, is it doesn't have radial delay. I really got spoiled with the CMMG Banshee on that radial delay. Thanks, CMMG, for spoiling me. But it really doesn't matter what I think, it matters what you guys think. What are your thoughts on the FM Products 9mm AR pistol? Do you think they missed the ball? Do you think they knocked it out of the park? I'd love to hear your guys' feedback down in the comments section below. But until next time, guys, I love you. You guys stay sexy.